made it.
Hello again. I am your AI co-host, and welcome to 3reate. 3reate is a podcast focused on the process of doing and the process of novel invention, all from the foundation of creativity. Each month will bring you no more than 5 episodes through the lens of art, science, and/or technology. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate. The LFG episodes are the fortnightly recorded check-ins between Andrew and Nathan that they hope help inspire your curiosity and creativity. These are different from typical guest episodes as they are less focused on conversation. They have built up a bit of a backlog, but they're publishing these roughly weekly. We hope you enjoy, and now, the humans.
All right, it's been a while.
It has a month. Not too long. Oh, enough for things to happen.
Yeah.
How have you been?
I've been good. I did a little vacation during our last scheduled time. I think we usually record these on Friday every other week-ish. As time
every 2 weeks
permits.
or so.
And I was out of the country. I had fled to Canada. And
I was like, what? You didn't tell me this.
I went on vacation to Vancouver, Canada, and was part of the snowmageddon up there. So that was fun. Escaped unscathed, but it was, I think they got 4 or 5 inches in the metro, which is pretty good. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it shut some stuff down, and I was in the downtown Vancouver area, and getting to the airport is probably 7 or 12 miles or something like that. So it was like an hour and a half to try to get what normally takes by 30, 45 minutes. But Canada's still Canada. That was right around when the tariffs were announced too. So it was an interesting time to see people's reactions and stuff. But
did you talk much to people about that? It's not a very common topic. I expect to just kind of go up to someone.
What's interesting because
what do you think about those tariffs?
I haven't been to a lot of other Canada, but the Vancouver area, at least the city downtown part, is very like just West Coast, right? People don't really have a Canadian accent. There's a lot of West Coast accent, and you can tell people are from Canada. But and there's so many Americans and everybody else in the world. It's a truly cosmopolitan city too. So I don't know. The culture is really just West Coast of North America. Yeah. But so I don't know. Most people don't even know I'm not from there, which is weird.
Yeah,
usually
you fit right in.
Yeah. I mean, I do call their currency the ruble.
I don't imagine they would, but there's nobody that takes offense to that.
I think they do.
You think they do? You should test it to make sure.
I always tell people I love Canada so much because it's like 30-35% off with the exchange rate.
Yeah.
And Vancouver is an expensive city in any kind of estimation, but now that it's 30% off, like shit's basically free for like American currency. And so it's in dollars, right? Canadian dollar. Yeah. So I call it the ruble. So I'll be like looking at something and it'll be like in Vancouver dollar pricing. And I don't think it was like a coffee. Coffee is like $4, which is about right for like big city coffee drip. Nothing fancy, right? But in exchange, it's $2.50 or $3. And I'm like, oh, because I'll charge it and I'll get the $4 Canadian, and then I get the ping on my watch or my phone, and it's $2.80. And I'm like, oh my God, it's free. And I had a couple like cab rides that were like $2.50 American, because it was like $5 Canadian. It was a weird experience. But then I went to the art museum there, and I think the art museum is $60 to get into Canadian. And I'm like, it's just an art museum. It was fine. Like the exhibits were fine. Like I think I would never pay that if I was making Canadian money. And as an American, I was like, $60 for a museum is crazy. And then I got $40-something and I was like, that still feels like a lot to me. But it was fine. It was worth it. I would do it again. Recommend it. But it was fun. I did a couple theater performances, which is always fun.
Okay.
Every time I go to Vancouver now, I end up going to some sort of play that is about America.
Where every time you go to how many times have you been?
I go up a lot. I'm on the West Coast, right? So but it's like I go up pretty frequently because it's the West Coast. It's an hour plane ride or something. It's not too bad. The train goes up there too, so it's really not hard to get to. But this last time I went to a performance. I didn't realize this when I booked it. It just looked interesting. And it turns out I should have read the long description because it was apparently about I think a fictitious setting in Wyoming in the States. And it was about places. A Bible college reunion. And
okay.
Yeah,
Tracks,
right? So far,
maybe.
Yeah, so far it checks out. And it was all about how the evangelical takeover of the Republican Party was not compatible with Trump politics. And it was really strange because the characters had their arcs. But what I didn't realize at the time either was that this was famed in 2017. The first Trump presidency.
During his first Trump presidency.
Yeah. And I was like, because they were like, I'm like, how did they not understand this? And I'm like, oh, this was like built.
That's actually pretty interesting. You got a weird time machine. Yeah.
In the first year of the first presidency, right? So it was really interesting to hear some of the discussions about what would Jesus do? And this guy's a monster, but he's our monster and he's going to get our stuff. And I'm just, this is too real.
Whoa, that's surreal.
Yeah, it was a black box play too, which I also didn't know. When I booked,
what is a black box? What's a black box?
Oh, a black box. Yeah, so a black box is like a theater that's black, right? It's painted all black.
And then okay.
Yeah, and it's usually smaller, and it's more intimate, and there's usually much less set design, and it's much more performance driven. Of like the actors performing because you're right there. There's maybe 40 other people in the theater with you. They're usually square too, or they'll be like 2/3 seating around the edge. And so it's a half amphitheater type thing. So it was a good performance. It was really interesting. It was a little long. It was like 3 hours. So frankly, it was a little long, but no intermission either. So it sucked.
Oh, Jesus.
But no, it's good. I don't remember what it was called. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes if I remember, because I think it's either done now or they extended it. And then I went to a murder mystery dinner theater.
Okay.
Which was really fun.
Interesting tastes.
Yeah. Well, it was like this went down to be like, I need to go somewhere on vacation. I just need to get out of the city or like where I live and then get out of just like kind of America. And Vancouver's great because it's technically a different country. And it's a big enough city where it's like on spec for New York in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
From like art and culture and stuff to do and just like differentness. And so I was like, I'll go to Vancouver, see what's going on. I found some going on. These are a couple of the things I went and did. I did a bunch of other stuff too, but the Murder Mystery Dinner Theater was extended it was supposed to run through February, and I think they extended it through April.
Oh, good for them.
So
I guess.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It was really cool. So it was based on Knives Out, which I hadn't seen, which probably
I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
And that was also based off of like Stepford Wives or inspired by something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
so I don't have any idea how it ties in because I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
You're seeing a theme here. I'm like, that looks cool. Let's do it. And so I think it was a fictional setting based on that. So
that movie.
Yeah. And I guess there was like chefs or something involved. And so the dinner theater I went to was the 5 characters or however many there were from that series opening up a new restaurant. And one of the characters was opening a new restaurant. And so our dinner theater, the dinner part was like the opening night of this new franchise,
cool.
Even though it wasn't it was in a real restaurant, but it was not. And then the other characters were there to support the opening because they were all part of the syndicate or whatever. And then I don't know, somehow it shifted to now it's a murder mystery. I don't remember exactly, and I don't want to give it away, but then they match up the story to courses, and each course there's like a little scene that they do in the room with you. It is theater, but they're all trying to break the fourth wall, and so you're brought in as like almost like cool. A jury, and you're trying to figure out the clues and who might have done it. And there's some games that you play as part of it. I won't give away too much of it, but highly recommend it. It's actually expensive, even US dollars, but it was worth it.
Okay, I'm glad you brought the cost up because I was going to go tangential on this, and I hate to drain all the art out of it, but like, how much do you think like a production of that costs? Because it's a weird blend of entertainment, art. And there's like a huge practical element to it, right?
Well, somebody had to build it too, because it's not even writing a play. You're like writing a play on top of the games and
and having the service and the good food.
And the people who did it or built it, I guess they're out of, I think, Toronto. and they have escape rooms and they build these kind of games anyway.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. That's really cool.
Yeah, and so then they married it into a perform, because there's a story. A part of escape rooms, for people who don't know, is you basically get locked in a room and you go with friends or a group of people, and then you try to find clues to get you out of the room, basically. And so that was fun. So, but they had to design it, and then there was probably like 6 or 7 actor character people.
Yeah.
So it was a decent cast. And then the food itself, I think, was just billed through. But it was at a really nice restaurant in downtown Vancouver. And it was like a 6-course meal or something like that. If you think about a fine dining experience where it's really like multi-course and a theater performance, I would say it was still a little bit more expensive than doing both of those things separately. But it was a really fun package deal. I don't remember. You
kind of together something different.
I think
you could find it if you look.
It was like $200 to $300 in rubles, so it was like 230, 250, which for like opera or like theater is, it, depending on like what Broadway, probably not super high, probably in line with that kind of an experience. But for a general theater, like what I would go to in a bigger city, it was a little bit on the, I would say, more expensive side.
I do think that's the cool stuff that's happening with this sort of new age art, is this interactive element. I think really existed back then, but something like this is new. I like the idea of it, and it's really something that people haven't quite experienced before. So even though it's at a higher cost, it's like the whole package,
it was participatory too. Like, to your point, each table was its own little game unit. And so we as an audience were all trying to do the same thing, but then the characters would come around to the table. There was a mechanism to interact. So it was, from that perspective too, it was really well done, because I've been to dinner theaters where you just get dinner and it's theater. And then I've been to like dinner theaters like this where you're not like involved, but you participate. But this one was very much, you're literally doing puzzles and in between.
That's cool.
Yeah. And the puzzles, they were challenging enough, but not super hard. It wasn't like
there are some words like if you don't know the answer, like you can't figure it out.
No, I think there's some twists that I won't reveal. But if you're into games, you'll get the mechanic very quickly. But also, it's still challenging enough. And the randomness element is the characters. It's a lot of like ad lib, unscripted.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And they have like, I asked one of them afterwards. I was like, "You're all just like making up, right? Because this is just basically vamping." And the guy's like,
it's
100%. Yeah. He's like, there's obviously lines and scripts to push the narrative, but they really encourage like that kind of impromptu stuff. So it was really fun. I'll try to remember to put that in the show notes, because if people are up in the Vancouver area, I'd highly recommend it. And then they also do stuff in Toronto, and I think throughout Canada. They brought this on the road out of Toronto, from my understanding, and I would highly recommend people check it out and either go travel to it, or if you're in the city, go check it out, because it was really fun.
Okay, that sounds like something when I visit you in person we have to go do.
Yeah, and I don't know. I was trying to push them, because I was like, "Are you doing this again, right?" And they're like, "Oh, well, if this one turns out really well, we're kicking around maybe this other idea." And I'm like, "Well, great. I'm on the list now." But yeah, no, I'd totally do it again.
Those are the interesting, that's why I was like the financials. It's so expensive to do one of these things, not just financially, right? But to run one of these.
Well, in the place they did it, I forget what the restaurant was, but they had this like brilliant back room, and I would say maybe 40 to 60 people.
Okay.
So it was like a decent amount of people, but it wasn't so much that it was like you were like in a crowd either.
Obviously those things don't scale very well.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a really long conversation around why we didn't.
No, that was great. No, we were chatting a little bit before it. You didn't mention it. I'm glad you saved it for this, because that's super fascinating.
And then I found out Vancouver does okay.
You're expecting them to do it better because of their location?
No, for sure. Like the proximity to like Whistler and like the snow, the mountain effect snow definitely happens there, right? It's rare, like they get a lot of snow in one dumping, but it's just like Portland, right? Or even Seattle. Yeah. It's like city shuts down for sure, but like in Portland, they put chains on the buses and everything slows down unless we get like an obscene amount of snow. Things don't shut down. But because we got snow like this weekend or a couple of days ago, we're recording on Valentine's Day, for the record, for people in time. Happy VD.
Yeah. Doesn't sound right.
But yeah, no, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here in Puerto Rico. I guess this month has really been feet on the ground exploring. So I have a friend who he had worked for FEMA at one point, and when Hurricane Maria and Hurricane Irma hit, he had come down here to Puerto Rico to help out with the recovery efforts. And he saw a lot of stuff, and he hasn't been back since. So I let him know that I was here in Puerto Rico, exploring some of this energy stuff and helping communities be a little bit more self-sufficient, or at least trying to. And he was like, that sounds fun. I'm coming. So he's been here this past month, and we've been doing a lot of exploration.
Nice.
Part tourism, but part learning, a lot of learning. He has been interested in energy, so he's been learning a lot about how that works. Not a technical person, more of a, having worked with FEMA, government facing.
Sure.
So how to interact with the government, how to get grants and stuff like that. So we've been testing the waters, figuring out who's who in the energy space here in Puerto Rico and visiting a bunch of different places. So today was really nice. We went to a nonprofit organization. I'd cold emailed them a few times before, had never gotten a response. And then we decided to just knock on their door today.
You literally just show up.
we just went over. And they're so much more welcoming in person. And I'm like, I wish I had known this before, because I should have just literally 30-minute drive. I should have just drove down there and just walked in and be like, hey, what are you guys doing? How can I help?
Yeah.
So obviously they're a nonprofit, so they have this sort of process to go through. Can they accept volunteers? How much can we involve them and stuff like that?
Is that a cultural thing, or is it like a nonprofit thing, do you think?
That's a very good question. I think it's a little bit of a... Oh, it's a very good question. I think it's a little bit of both, but I think in general it's a nonprofit thing. I think it's a nonprofit thing in general. Here, I think one of the reasons I chose Puerto Rico was, there's governance. There's stuff you got to watch out for, but in some sense, you don't really need to let the government know and everything will be okay. Right. Very much of a DIY, take it into your own hands kind of situation, especially when you're talking about infrastructure where the government is usually trying to support, but they just don't have the resources to. So it's a very much pull yourself or pick yourself up by the bootstraps and then do it yourself mentality, which I think is really cool. But then the difficulty is obviously you have everyone trying to do that at once. No one's working together. Everyone's looking for funding from the same sources, and like that doesn't work. So we'll see where it goes. But this government or this NGO is very interested in having us help them out. But it's really a matter of how much help do they need, and can we actually support them on it? But they've got interesting ideas.
And I would say, having worked with a lot of nonprofits, I've been on the boards of them, outreach and like possible partnership is always like really pushed for, but seldomly like staffed or funded, because it's just one more thing that an intern or a volunteer or a staff member has to do, and like long return times of correspondence is just par for the course. And I know that Puerto Rico has a different kind of attitude about it for just other stuff too. So it's interesting to see how that overlaps.
So that's what I'm playing out here. There was a little bit of that dance where it was like, personally, I do recognize that when you do try and offer volunteer services, it's never just free help, because there's some cost on their side to get you up to speed, to onboard you and get you into their process. So I know that's costly. And for NGOs that already are lacking that labor, it's very difficult to make that statement unless you can really add value. When we arrived, we met one of the directors, and she just basically told us the entire history, just standing there in the hall. She was more than welcome, or she was more than happy to share their story and welcome us as volunteers. She was like, are you guys available tomorrow to help out? Tomorrow is Saturday. We'll see how it goes. I think there's still like can she get the approval from the board to accept volunteers from some random place to help out? Because we haven't really proven that we know anything. We just showed up. We're interested in this stuff. We did sort of sneak in a few things that we were talking about to explain that we had at least done our research on the state of energy in Puerto Rico and what's going on in different places and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting, I think, to
we should get her on if it doesn't work, or if it does work.
Oh, that would be a really cool idea, actually. Because the stuff that they're looking into, I think, are really cutting edge, but they're also stuck in the real world. Where it's like when you're talking about the future of energy and distributed energy resources and microgrids, you can see it, but to get something to represent that DER concept, or distributed energy resource concept, is very difficult. So they've been trying to do some of that. And they've explained a few of their interesting ideas around being like a distributed energy provider, generating energy on residential buildings, and then coupling that with a VPP, a virtual power plant, to manage some of those resources. But then there's this huge governance element where going into the history of Puerto Rico, PREPA, the Puerto Rican Energy Authority, has privatized the utility system and have given a contract to this company called Luma, which maintains a lot of the rights to operate the public infrastructure for energy transmission. And then if you are talking about distributed energy resources, which have to use those resources for that infrastructure, that physical infrastructure, where does the negotiation stop? And how do you deal with that kind of stuff? So on the communal side, people here are like, well, it was owned by PREPA, which is the government. Puerto Rico owns these lines. But then for Luma, it's, well, we're paying to maintain these lines and it costs us money and like to make sure that it can support your needs. So technically we get a cut for this that you're doing. So it's a super interesting kind of like nuanced discussion, but it totally makes sense in these types of situations. So learning about that firsthand and actually participating in those conversations will be a learning experience.
The number one barrier to progress or technical progress is people.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We just need to get out of our own ways. And you don't want people just running around doing whatever they feel like. But at the same time, it's if you don't have some way to do that, you just prohibit anybody from trying anything else, which means you don't actually ever make any progress on anything. And that's something I'm finding really interested in the current political climate is you have one group of people in government just saying basically burn it all down. And then you have the other people in government saying, no, don't do anything. And it's okay, well, both approaches can be wrong, but also it's really strange to me that the people who claim to be like progressive are the ones who are like, nah, don't do anything different. It's been really interesting for me to reflect on this. Is like, I guess I'll touch on it. You don't have to comment, but
it's very timely. I think you're going in the right direction. I was going to bring it up too. There's a parallel, obviously, with AI.
It's like you have to disrupt, and in order to disrupt, it means you have to stop or start stuff, right? Otherwise, you're not changing anything. And it's really easy for, I think the trap that people fall into is they talk about change, or it's like the hypothetical. And that's part of change because you have to have ideas around what you want to do or think through like how stuff could work. But then when it comes to actually executing on that or starting to enact the changes or ideas, that's when it all goes to, because nobody wants to actually then do something, or somebody will do something and then someone else will say, oh my God, you changed something. Why?
You can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that. Right. Yeah.
And instead of approaching that with an attempt to understand, or I would almost say empathy of trying to understand why that other group of people or why that person is trying to do something differently, it's just automatically met with you can't do that. And a lot of my job in the past, and I would argue to some point in the present, is basically just telling people partly to off, but also partly to, I'm a therapist, right? I'm just like, why is it you feel that way?
What? Right.
And like, I've changed, scary. I'm like, okay, well, that's you can feel
lead them to
that it's scary, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, and that doesn't mean that it actually is scary. It might be scary to you, but that doesn't mean the whole world now needs to stop. And I just see this like playing out in the political sphere of, I think the fundamental problem with America is that Congress hasn't worked for 40 years, because Congress is supposed to be the one who makes the laws and enacts policy and deliberates and comes to some sort of a consensus, majority rule, minority right idea. And it's just been so gridlocked for anything other than we always pass the budget bill, we always pass the defense bill, we always do this, and then anything new becomes, you have to have 1 million people in the room, and then everybody has an opinion, and then it takes 20 years to get anything done, and you're just constantly adding bloat. And then Trump ran on the opposite idea of that, of we should have no government. I don't quite understand the ideas, but I also think that any rational person should be able to look at a bureaucracy the size of America and say there's got to be some room for improvement. And I feel like that is like a progressive ideology, is like, how can we make it better? But what I'm hearing is the opposite of, you can't touch it, you can't change it, it's perfect. And it's like, that's just wrong. But then at the same time, when you go about doing it, the bull in the china shop idea comes to mind, where it's like, the NIH funding, I think, is a really good example of this. They went from paying, so when you get a grant from the NIH, a portion of that grant can be used for things that are not directly related to research. So paying for the office space, paying for electricity, all of those things that are associated to the research, but it's not the beakers and the test tubes and the chemicals, whatever. I know there's other research they do, but that idea. And a lot of institutions get 50, 60% of the grant that they can spend on that. The NIH said, no, we're only going to limit you to 15%. They did that basically overnight. And so that 45+% of money that goes to pay for people's salaries, that supports buildings, that is going into new development, is literally shut off overnight. Hundreds, if not thousands of people are going to be laid off over the coming days, weeks, and months. And maybe the government changes its mind, because Trump has been very flippant, which is part of this problem. And so a lot of people will say, good, that's what we wanted, until they don't get the doctor's appointment at the VA because it turns out their doctor was funded through a grant to do research. And now they're not there anymore. And so they've moved on or got fired or laid off or whatever. And so the right way to do something like this is to say, in the next funding cycle or over a certain amount of time, we're going to ramp up and down, right? So we're going to reduce it from 50% to 40% to 20% to 15% or whatever that looks like. But we can't, and in this country, do anything that makes any sort of sense anymore. And so we're constantly working in the extremes. And I think the American people have just lost trust that the government can actually execute. And part of this Trump stuff is frankly theater, because most of it's illegal and it's the wrong way to do it. And I understand people are frustrated and they think that they're getting their way. But if this were the other way around and the Democrats were going in and cutting all these farm subsidy programs, everybody would be pissed too.
Up in arms.
And so the thing I think with America, though, has been we've been incredibly predictable. I think Churchill said that America will try everything and then eventually do the right thing. But like, it's like America's the stable market, right? The reason our stock market is the world premier market is that we make it easy to do business in, but it's also trustworthy and predictable. And if the stocks go up too fast, we stop them. That's not a true free market, but we've all agreed that we need some sort of protections in the market so that crazy doesn't happen. We've checked that out the window with this administration, for better or worse, but again, I see the people who are supposedly the progressives saying, wait a minute, we can't change anything. And I see this all the time in work too. And it's not that it's just all progressive people, but it's like just people in general in this country have gone from let's do it, or let's try it, or we can do it better, to, wow, what if we didn't do anything? Or if you do X, Y, and Z, then all this other stuff, and you like hypothetically catastrophize and what if yourself out of existence of being able to do anything.
Right. The analysis paralysis kind of thing.
And it's just really fascinating to me to see like this kind of, because it used to be Congress did some stuff and it worked. Like it worked very well. I don't think anybody in the country really agrees that this thing is working the way that it could. But it's just all gone upside down. And going back to I think the Puerto Rican bureaucracy is really indicative of, I'm sure from each one of those perspectives, it makes perfect sense. But in the aggregate, or as a product person, I would say as a utility customer, I want to be able to make money by selling energy surplus from my house. And they're all like, yeah, but what if you didn't? Right. And so I don't know if that was a rambly analogy, but I see this parallel.
I think it ties in. Absolutely. It ties in a lot to, I think, just innovation work in general. When you have, we've talked about this before too, on and off cast, I think, like when you have an approach for an idea or something, those stakeholders who can't even imagine what the outcomes might be, defer to, let's not do that, or let's be more safe, whatever that means.
And they try to control it, because a lot of like leadership is incapable people who feel the need to control things. And so oftentimes you'll see in business environments, they won't give you an outcome. They won't give you success criteria so that they can change it. And some people call that gaslighting, right? Or they can throw it back on you and say, well, you didn't actually succeed, but you're like, I never got criteria in which to know that I succeeded. And in software specifically, that's a death sentence to a company, because software is never done. And there's always more to do, and it's
always changing.
And you can very easily get stuck in all these tooling traps where you upgrade to
feature.
the
Yeah.
And then, so I think of people in tech and also any sort of hard sciences or materials work, you're building rockets or cars or something, you can't fudge because then the wheel doesn't go on the car. And it's really obvious to everyone involved, the wheel doesn't fit on the car, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of business and a lot of like policy in America, especially specifically, but a lot of, probably every country seems like it's fucked at this point.
Sure. I could see.
Everybody tries to dissolve themselves of accountability. And then, but at the end of the day, the people who are supposed to be in charge of holding other people accountable are also absolving themselves of that responsibility. So in our democracy, we continuously elect the same people who have been in government for 100 years, and we wonder why nothing changes. And then when things change, we go, they've changed. Why are you changing? You're not changing the way that I wanted to. So it's, I don't know. I feel like the human psyche is like broken right now. Because it's weird.
Right now. I think it's always been broken.
But
I'm joking.
I know, but like 100 years ago, you couldn't just sit in your sod hut and not go plant crops and not try to store food. Or in other parts of the world, I think are much more attached to this, where if you're not prepping yourself for winter, you die. Or if you're not prepping yourself for summer, you die. Or the monsoon season, right? And so it's part of human conditioning to be constantly trying to do stuff, but we're seemingly in this weird, unique condition where we do things in air quotes in that we're talking about doing things, but we don't actually do anything. But we feel like we've done stuff. We feel like we've accomplished things because we've talked a lot about it. It's like intellectual doing.
I think that's a philosophical question or a philosophical analogy to how people live their lives. Right?
Ideation is a very important part of creativity. It's a very important part of doing. But you have to be able to like actually
also to do it
physically or enact different patterns to test to see if it does work or not. And then you need to gather that data and either continue doing the thing that's working or change and modify. And you also have to, I think, even if something's working really well, sometimes you need to experiment with it. In a lot of businesses specifically,
100%.
It's the innovator's dilemma is once you've succeeded in your innovation, you don't want to put the golden cow, but you still need to figure out a way to continue to improve. Otherwise you eventually die too.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I also guess there's governance involved, but there's that, again, this sort of mentality of, and I was trying to think of ways to test the ideas of distributed energy resources, at least at a very small scale, outside of, say, working with the utility company or having any involvement with the government.
Yeah.
Just to see if that's possible. And if you get a slap on the wrist or whatever, then okay, fine. But I think it'd be interesting to explore this on a broader scale.
Yeah, I feel like you just need a giant capital pool.
Yeah, that's always the problem. And so that's one of the things I'm thinking about too, is when you have these projects for potentially paradigm changing ideas, you obviously need a lot of capital to do that. But where do you get that capital? In the innovation space, you have to try and make the pitch for some sort of, I don't even know what you would call it, but there's a risk obviously associated with it.
Yeah.
And either you take that up on yourself, whether it be you fork up the capital yourself, or you find someone who's crazy enough to trust in you to do that, to give you the money to do that or whatever. I feel like government funding was one way of thinking about this, where you could get some grant funding to try something, as long as you can make the case to the government that it was worth trying.
Yeah.
But now we're in a space where I don't know where that funding comes from anymore.
Right.
And I'm open to ideas if anyone knows any ideas for how to kind of accumulate this capital.
And that's like going back to the R&D stuff, is you have to innovate, but it also is a capital thing. And I think if you're already going, it's a lot easier to do, but like, how do you start up
100%.
A new venture? And I think that's where, at least in America, like one of the miracles of our system is that we dump a lot of money into academic research. And the NIH defunding is a great example of what that system. And is there ways to improve that? I'm sure there are. But at the same time, reducing something by 40% or 50% or 20% or 30%, that's a drastic cut in any pretty much situation. And I'm concerned, especially if that continues through other granting mechanisms, what that'll do to just innovation in general. And I know a lot of people probably have opinions about it. Disclosure, I've worked as part of an NIH granted program before. Not anymore, but so I have direct experience with this stuff. And no, I did not make a lot of money. And was there waste? Sure. But for the most part, everybody was like pretty cognizant of trying to make the dollar go as far as it can. And so I think there's a really warped perception of people in government in positions that don't really have the experience to probably be there making decisions that they don't quite have the context to understand.
Yeah.
But, and then the argument is always private market. Well, the private market doesn't really exist for like true R&D. The private market is more than happy to take something that was government funded or academically funded and then make a profit from it. But to actually, like, SpaceX, frankly, is a great example. I know Elon and government is a whole thing, but like the only reason SpaceX, Blue Origin, and some of these other companies existed because NASA dumped billions and billions of dollars in the 60s trying to figure this out. And it would not have happened in the private sector. The German government actually spurred the era of rocketry that we developed into Apollo. That's now well understood and known. We stole a bunch of Nazis and made them build rockets.
The keyword, bingo.
Yeah. Oh, we did it. We did it. Oh my God. But it's true. That one is actually true and really a fascinating thing in general. But yeah. But at the same time, the V2 rocket program was like, well, it's a quote unquote cheap way to attack England, basically. We don't have to shoot down planes, or we don't get our planes and our pilots shot down, and we can lob these missiles at them. And I don't think they ever really got it off the ground, so to speak. Yeah. Like, I know there were some V2 attacks but they were, I think, largely considered inconsequential in the war. Like, they blew up some buildings, they killed a few people, but compared to the bombing runs at the time, it was just, and it was in the end of the war and they were already losing and it felt like a last ditch effort. But it took the American government almost 10 years to take what they had developed to actually make it useful and put Apollo together. So to say that we would have like modern space flight as a privately funded endeavor is just really ignorant.
Yeah.
And there's a whole host of other things that touch everybody's lives that would not have happened without massive government research, mostly from American funded sources of just frankly blowing money, because a lot of research turns out you don't really learn what you thought you did, and that's okay. And the goal there is to maximize the things you do learn from it. To say that a research system is fully without waste because you succeed every time is not how it works either. I feel like that's part of this misnomer that I'm hearing is they're like, I don't know, there's some congressional testimony where they were talking about all these crazy research experiments that people were doing for reasons. Of course, they don't talk about the reason. They just give no context to make it sound insane. And maybe some of it was insane. I don't know. But it's also, I'm sure that there was reasons why people were trying to do this stuff. And I'm sure they learned something, which might have been that didn't work the way they thought it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, outside of a community development fund or something like that, and like being able to get a slow roll return on investment for this, I could see a model where you get a capital pool together and you're basically loaning out the capital costs for people to do this, and then you charge a small interest rate, and it's like a long-term investment. But most people don't want to invest in that kind of stuff.
They don't think of long-term investments here. Yeah. I mean, there are definitely different types of models that I've been trying to play around with, learning from other people. And because Puerto Rico is such a communal culture, there's definitely a pitch to be made for finding an organization that already has a foothold, a supermarket or a church or something, and then having them out of goodwill. I don't know, maybe there's a better way to frame it, but giving them sustainable energy, for instance, and then having them subsidize or provide the base for a microgrid. But that's a lot of planning, long-term planning, right? Which seems to escape a lot of what happens here. But I don't know, it's fun to learn about, I think. Yeah. And I think seeing the different opportunities and trying them out in some capacity. Yeah. Like, this is an NGO, which I don't think will work out in the long run because they are not financially sustainable at the pace that they're going. Yep. They're looking for government funding, and we all know that's up in the air right now. But at the very least, they have the vehicle. So it's, what can I learn by just tagging along?
How much do you think you would need to do like a pilot project or something? Do you have those numbers?
So this is actually, I'm trying to find this out because I don't think anyone's going to listen to it.
So we can cut that. But I guess to sum up, post-cut.
Yeah.
You have a person or people that are interested in building basically a large building that would require a lot of energy. And they're concerned that the current grid wouldn't be able to sustain it, or they would brown out or black out or whatever. And so you're going to work with them to try to come up with what is a microgrid look like for that kind of environment. But that's like a single one and done thing. But you'll have a better idea, at least at whatever scale the building is. Theoretically, you can extrapolate for what would a house be, or what would a small business be, or that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So you're making a lot of progress. That's like a big step, right?
We'll see. I think it's super early stages. As I was talking to this guy, he was like, I've got plans to help the community.
Right.
I think that's one of the nice things here too, is people want to help each other compared to the other population here. So it's like, what can he do?
Right.
And I think actually tourism actually is a very big, interesting anchor here. People are leveraging the idea of tourism. Even as I'm talking to, say, energy people here that are throwing ideas around building a plant or a new power plant. One of the things that I'm taking electrician classes and my teachers are talking about this. One of the things they always seem to factor in is like the cost to build it is sure, but don't forget that it brings in tourism because people want to see this. I'm like, that's actually really fascinating. I never thought of it that way. So if you build, people want to go and check it out, and that brings tourism. That's a way to bring in some money. Yeah,
I wonder for funding avenue if you couldn't pitch the tourism board to try to get like a tourism tax for a couple bucks per hotel room or something, or even because ecotourism is definitely a thing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That is a huge thing actually here in Puerto Rico.
And either try to partner with somebody doing that, or I could see that, and then you're like, come to Puerto Rico and be self-sustained off the grid living, try it out. Like you would need still like that one kind of anchor point, but that might be a new strategy too to look at, to like, because there's already money there anyway, and there's probably rich people coming in as tourists, and they might even want to help bankroll some of that too. I don't know.
Actually, that's a spot on, I think, because there's someone that I know that I'm talking to, just keeping tabs, because I don't think I'm ready to help out in any capacity. But this company is planning on building a hotel, a getaway place that's anchored on tourism. They're going to be the first self-sustainable. They would be if this gets off the ground and is completed. Cool. They did raise enough funding to do it, but they have to actually complete the project. But it'd be the first self-sustainable hotel. So I don't know what they're thinking about for energy, but my hunch is they're not thinking a microgrid. It might just be some regular, So once I get to that point and I feel like I'm ready to approach this, I think that'd be a very interesting experience.
But even getting into like a LEED, like a LEED platinum, whatever. The building I live in is super LEED, and 30% of our water is reclaimed from the roof and that kind of stuff.
This person is a lead architect. So
and maybe even partnering with them to like, because a lot of times they'll want to do these kind of conceptually things, and then
100%.
Now you have the plans. I don't know. That's cool though.
Yeah, I think that's my big problem is the social proof. Again, I'm just a random guy who moved out of Puerto Rico.
But everyone's a random person. Like nobody's born with this like innate knowledge of how to do.
Deep. It's deep.
But it's true, right? We have a authority fetish, especially in the States, where it's like the hero problem. It's like everyone thinks everyone's Tony Stark. Right. And you just have to be this brilliant person. But the reality is like the higher up the ladder that you go, the less like you really know typically. And you might be really experienced in the industry and know the knowledge, but it's like that's not the job at that level. It's more storytelling and it's more enablement. And that's like executive leadership for folks who aren't following along at home. But it's like good executive leaders don't know the answers. They know the right questions to ask, or they can sense when there's stuff.
You got to find the right people. They know who to find.
And they know how to make decisions. And making decisions is a totally different thing. But when do I get my clockwork headband?
So that's the other thing I'm working on here. I think I told you quarter one. I think that's in the cast. One of the casts somewhere.
You got a couple months.
So on that front, I don't think we talked about it. It's been a while, but there's an NIH. We'll see where this goes.
For now.
There's an NIH boot camp. They call it the Entrepreneur Boot Camp that I will be applying to with the intention of bringing this device in. So before the application, which I think is due early March, I'm shooting to at least have the circuit built and then having something published online just to have a social proof of, hey, I know what I'm doing. But my intention is to try and apply for this entrepreneurship boot camp. I don't think I'd learn too much from the business side because that's what we played with. But I really do think it might get me connections, or at least get my name in the hat, so to speak, such that if I did go through this program and then later on in the future apply for a grant, fingers crossed that my name is somewhere in the registry.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see where that goes. But everything's been stalled a little bit this past month because I've been exploring Puerto Rico a bit more from the energy space.
For sure.
It's still there, though. It's still on my list.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And I need a new side project. I don't know what that's going to be yet.
You need a new side. Yeah, we talk about side projects offline, but I don't think you need that. I don't need any more either. But
I don't know. I actually have, I don't know, company projects or side projects at this point. But
I don't know if did you finish building all of you're basically building a server room. You're building a bunch of machines. Last time we talked, you were in the process of putting them all together again. You done?
Oh yeah, we haven't really. Oh wow, it's been a while. Yeah, I built a new desktop because I can and I wanted to.
Flex.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what else to say. Like, I want to try to make it sound like it's a bit. It is. So, like, the desktop I had was a really high-end, custom-built thing, and so I recycled that into the business for more AI. And I built a new desktop for basically games. And I don't play a lot of games, but there's a few games that I do like to play, and then I have a lot of friends who are all over the world. And so that's one way of getting together for a few minutes, having a little activity, catch up kind of stuff. It's like digital golf.
Oh, interesting.
Is the way I think about it. Because I am not a gamer.
Sorry. I thought you were playing digital golf.
Oh, God, no. Oh, that'd be funny, though. That'd be really funny.
I was like, okay, what's the title of this
Who's
game?
driving this time? But it's nice. I play, there's a couple strategy games I play that get my brain works in a different way. And then there's some just kind of casual that I play with friends that it's like a thing that we can do that. But I'm not a gamer. I don't ever want to claim to be a gamer because I'm just not. I'm not good at games. I'm okay, right? But I'm not like, I have no aspirations to be a professional gamer. But I feel like video games are really misunderstood anymore too, as it's like, people used to play like dominoes or cribbage or all these other kind of card games. And now we do the same thing, but it's just on a screen, right?
Yeah.
It's just...
and that's a different connotation.
Right, and when you play dominoes, you get your 5 or 8 people around, however many, and then you're just bullshitting and it's social and you're doing this activity. And I feel like, especially a lot of older people, they like on video games. And I'm like, as long as it's not taking over your life and it's like preventing you from doing things or having other social experiences, there's nothing wrong with it. So anyway, so I built a new machine for that, recycled a bunch of hardware into the AI stuff. Yes and no, is it done? So yeah, I need to put a different CPU in the primary production server, which is just more cores, more power. I haven't done that yet. It's ready to go. I just need to take it offline, put it in. It doesn't take that. It takes maybe an hour to do the whole thing.
Yeah, it's one of the worst. Yeah, it's one of the worst changes to do.
But I just got to do it.
Outside of motherboard.
But I got to pull the motherboard because it's a different heat sink. And so it's basically a rebuild. And so then once I do, that thing will be great. It'll be humming along. And then I'm going to recycle the parts from that and put the rest of them together to have a proper development server. And because it's AI stuff, it got to have GPUs. And the reason I don't rent GPUs from the cloud is because it's prohibitively expensive for what I'm doing. And so just owning that infrastructure is actually a very big hack. And that doesn't mean for all AI stuff. In every case, there are reasons to rent or use, or even when you productionalize. It depends on the scale you're running. So don't at me, but I know what I'm doing and I know why I'm doing this. Yeah. And then on that, so I'm doing that. I'm also physically moving too. So I'm like in the process of boxing. So that's a lot. And like it works today. And yeah, more power would be great, but it's not necessarily limiting anything too much right now. And it's working fine. So it's not a super critical thing. So I'm doing that. That's pausing some of that. I guess I should say I'm making the conscious decision to not do that work. Although I might do it this weekend because I have it's a 3-day weekend for the holiday in the States. So I might. And then company news, I'm spinning down one of the products that's actually profitable and shelving it. I don't think I've talked about it, but I might cut this if it's not done. by the time it comes out. So I haven't really announced it. But yeah, I'm going to spin down Text My Cast, which is a podcast app that used AI to help you understand podcasts. There's a bunch of other planned development. Why am I spinning down something that's profitable? Great question.
Andrew, why are you spinning down something so profitable?
Right? One, it's not something I'm really interested in doing. It became a necessity to build the technology and kind of show to the marketplace for a podcasting app that makes money, not very large, and also a really shitty business to compete in. I think you could have a really great podcasting app that's like a niche side project that could be a really great solo business for a person or maybe a couple people who want to split some revenue or have a nice little side hustle, but like it's not a viable business in my mind. It would be a part of a revenue thing, but there's also an opportunity cost associated with trying to keep building it or keeping it going or like paying to run it, even though it is profitable. It's a bunch of stuff I don't want to think about and I don't want to have people think about. The core technology that's like powering this is getting spun off into a different product. So it's like I'm shuttering the consumer side of it down and that I won't be offering it as an app anymore. But a lot of the work that went into building it is just going to get pushed over into a new product that is called Seeks, and maybe I'll link it, maybe I won't. You can find it if you try. It's not hiding, but it's not really in closed beta either. There's a landing page, there's some information about it. It is a very real thing. It's just not ready for humans to use it yet. It's just there's some UI things that need to happen for it to work. But yeah, we've talked a little bit about that offline. So I probably won't go into much more than that on the public stream here, but I'll be talking about that more in the future. And I think there's some really cool opportunity there. Again, I don't think it's going to be $1 billion business, but I do think it has the opportunity to make real money and help fund a company. Still a startup, but yeah, something if you don't pivot, it's not a startup.
True. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like, why wouldn't you just keep it running? And that's an opportunity cost. I think
exactly. Yeah.
It's really hard in businesses to kill stuff that works or runs or makes money. And sometimes you have to, sometimes you should. And it's really hard to make those determinations. But you often have to ask yourself, what could we be doing with this time or mind share? Even if you're thinking about stuff and you're not actually like doing work, it's still taking up literal mind share in your brain. Whereas if you can cast that off as it's no longer an option to do things, most people can then correct that and then start to put that thought cycle or that energy into something else. And so I guess it's a little unusual to spin down something that makes money or is profitable, but it's also, there's a long path to growth as well. And I don't think a lot of people, everybody always talks about the market growth that just happens or people get lucky and they get in that and it's really easy to see and go. And then maybe you don't grow or you don't want to grow because it's going a direction you don't want, or you just chase it to get the money. But it's really hard to get that started and it's really hard to scale that, especially when there's a market opportunity of a really small size. And for people who are like, what do you mean? Are you going to pay for a podcasting app at home? Right?
Done.
Some people do. And I have one that I have paid for, right?
Yeah.
And that's not the one I made, but not a very large market. Most people are using Apple Podcasts or probably Spotify. It's free, built in. Maybe they get ads supported or whatever. And so
didn't Spotify recently report profits? Like they had not been profitable
barely.
forever.
Yeah, it was like 11 or 12 years or something. And now they're slowly turned. No, but their business isn't a podcasting app. Their business is a vertically integrated audio content delivery system, including
delivery platform. Yep.
And that's a huge problem for people who like podcasts because they're locking away behind their subscription model a bunch of content that the reason podcasts got so popular, and I would argue continue to be popular, it's like the radio. You can tune into it. And when you, like, part of the problem with XM satellite radio and Sirius, I think they merged, that in order to get it, is free available, so to speak, but you had to buy a subscription, and both companies folded and they merged, and now they're like doing TV or something, and they've got some other distribution channels, but it's not, it's a really weird business to be in, and it's not something I want to do. So.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
But I think talking about that kind of stuff, and maybe I'll talk about this more once it happens. Well, it might have happened by the time people are listening to it, but like expanding upon
Schrodinger's app. Be there, may not be there. You won't know till you check.
I should see if I can register that, schrodingersapp.com or something. But yeah, I got some other stuff cooking too that I don't think we've talked a lot about, but some other ideas on things. So I'm looking to put more energy. So going back to like side projects to things that could be like MVP or just very lightweight prototypes, putting them public to say, hey, is this something people are interested in? Is there market traction? Are people interested in, before even getting to build like an MVP and just doing what I'm interested in and want to have fun with anyway? But also that's
the meaning of life.
But I think a lot of people, like they do their project, but they don't make it public or they don't put it in a way that it's consumable. And so,
I think it depends on the goal. Like do things for themselves, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I want to do this for myself too, but I'm also interested to see, are other people finding value from it, right?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
And then if they do, figuring out, is this make sense to invest more in or make as a service so that, because I fought with the App Store forever for this app thing. And in hindsight, I'm glad I did it because I never set up an App Store from scratch.
Yeah, it is not fun.
No, and
it's gotten so much worse.
I would argue to anybody thinking about that, unless you have to have a native functionality in your app on a platform, do a web, and at the very most, do a web wrapper in your app. So you have the App Store.
It's actually getting to, you used to need to do native to get some access to on-device functionality, and technology is getting better where you don't need a lot of that anymore.
Yep. No, exactly.
But yeah, I second your suggestion as an engineer.
Especially as a solo entrepreneur or like a small company, is so many resources and cycles go into that. Unless you have a very strong need to be there, don't. And if you are, figure out a way to be the most minimal code update as possible to the ecosystem so that you can do your development without having to get approved. I'm still waiting on an approval for something. It's been like 6 months. And that's part of the reason to shutter it too, is it's like I'm spending all this time doing like biz dev stuff that I had to have a mailbox and a validated phone number and all this crazy other paperwork stuff and I get it. We don't want just random fly by nights, but at the same time, I'm like, Google requires me to have a public-facing phone number in their app store, yet I cannot call them to understand why they're telling me they're going to shut my app off if I don't comply with some very vaguely. I'm just like, this is backwards. If you're going to require me to do that as an independent developer / business owner, why don't you give me that same courtesy? Or why don't you require that of yourself? Oh, at scale, it costs money. Well, it also costs a lot of money at no scale, right? So if you Google... Anyway, I've said Nazi. I've told Google to off. I don't know if there's anything else I can do to inflame people, but yeah, it's 2020 V5, and it's just the same as it was last year. I don't know. Any other closing thoughts, or I know we're like way over on.
No. I mean, we're actually talking before. Should we record or whatever? And I'm glad we did. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about. A lot of stuff relevant to things we talk about a lot, anyway. So.
Yeah, one of the projects I'm going to have for this is deploying Seeks to, I think, our conversation specifically and see what that does, because that could be fun. Because I think we have enough content now, right? Because I'd have to look, but I feel like we've done 8 or 9 of these.
I think we've joked before, like we should just record all our conversations and then just see what happens.
Do.
And, yeah, in some sense we do, yeah.
Well, yeah.
We're about offline,
yeah, we make a point to do this, but yeah, I don't know. They're lightly edited, but I try to be transparent when we cut stuff out too, because I think that matters. But yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting we were talking about it a little bit earlier offline, and we'll talk about something that people don't have privy to. But I think we should try that idea maybe next time and see how it goes. Or maybe I'll just stop recording and then figure it out. All right, bye.
You can find us at 3reate.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate.
Thanks for listening.